This is Love and Deepspace, long-awaited Revelry. We awaken in the back of a car, our mind and body struggling to wake up from the neurotoxin, and thankfully the inhibitor is doing its job. It's just taking a while. The man in black who took us is talking to someone on the phone saying he needs a better reward for taking such a high-value prey from the nest. The man loses track of where he's supposed to be going, and we start kind of driving around in circles, which is buying us time for the inhibitor to take effect so we can get out of this man's car. Out in the middle of nowhere, this man's car breaks down and he ends up taking us out into this abandoned, decrepit chapel ruin and tells the person on the phone to hurry up. I'm not waiting any longer. This is ridiculous. He realizes we're awake and we question him, who are you working for? Like, why are you kidnapping me? Because he obviously doesn't work for Kindness. And he asks where we hid the ether core, like where is it on us? Which means whoever asked him to kidnap us does not know where the ether core is. Two ominous voices appear from behind him saying it's not polite to kidnap Kindness's prey. The man freaks out and he holds us at knife point. And this is where the second voice comes in and says, we called dibs long ago. This red mist appears and grips the man, making him release us from being held at knife point. Two ominous voices come near us. One saying, I'm curious, she's brave enough to drink from a black glass. And the other says, what will she do when she's backed into a corner? So they're both very curious about us. And both of these men are wearing identical masks. And the man in black starts laughing behind them. And he says, so I see Silas sent you. The man pulls out a gun and points it at us. He takes a shot. But before the bullet is anywhere near us, he's consumed by this red mist that obliterates not just him, but the bullet as well. The camera pans up to a man standing at the top of the chapel where a bell ominously rings behind him. We're seen weak on the grounds of the ruins, still trying to fight off the neurotoxins completely, when the mechanical crow that we've seen several times flies up and joins him on his shoulder. This man steps off the side of the tower, soaring down to us, and when he hits the ground, the two masked men kneel behind him. This fine, gorgeous man tells them to take out the scum that are still running amok. He finally walks over to us, very cold and reserved. We realize that he is Silas, the leader of Kindness, and we ask him if he's here for the ether core. And all he does is chuckle and smirk, saying, even if you wanted to sell your soul, you'd have to find someone who can pay the price. He leans down, gripping our chin, forcing us to look into his glowing red eye. And at this time, we hear a voice, seemingly our voice, telling us to possess him and devour him. And if you do these things, you'll gain the power that you have always dreamed of. And while we're hearing these things, our head starts to hurt. And the voices continue, it's our power for the taking. Kill him. And all while this is happening, we just hear a clock ticking in the background. We then have a vision. Our hands are coated in blood, and we reach for a knife on the ground that is on the grounds of the ruins from the man left behind. And we're desperate to stop looking at his eye, to make the visions and the voices stop. And we finally grip the knife and we reach it up to Silas's face and end up scratching him before he stops us. But he doesn't show anger. He chuckles and says, is this how you greet a new friend? And then seemingly wipes the blood away and heals the cut that we had just given him. He then gently caresses our face, saying, I guess you don't remember anything. Allow me to jog your memory. This is where he gets a little bit more forceful with us, gripping our neck, saying, from your past to your future, to all the crimes you'll inevitably commit. After all, you and I were the same, true kindred spirits. Finally, our mind gives and our vision goes dark. We awaken on the ground before him in a completely different place, and he sat before us in a chair, and he says it's been 3 days and we still cannot resonate with him. He uses his Evol to drag us before him. We ask him what he wants. We're pleading for him just to stop. If we can't resonate, we can't just make it happen. He gently caresses our arm until he intertwines our hands, trying to resonate with us once more. We beg and plead for him to stop, and we start hearing those voices again, to devour, to possess, to kill him, and that he is ours. We manage a very slight resonance, and it seems to please him just a little bit. But he tells us it's a shame that you've let your Evol deteriorate to what it's become. We call BS on all of this and imply that he is the reason that Caleb and Josephine were both killed in that explosion. He gives it right back, implying that the people closest to us might be the ones who want to kill us the most. Our anger is uncontrollable, inconsolable. We can't get a hold on it, and we don't know why we're so angry with him. We tell him outright, I want to kill you. Like that's how much true anger we have in our heart for him. And he tells us we're essentially lucky he doesn't like picking on the weak, and summons a gun over with his Evol and hands it to us, saying, here you go, take a stab at it. We try to call his bluff. We hold it to his head and we're say, fine, I'll do it. I'm gonna do it. And he sees our hands shaking. So he drags it down. He wraps his hands around ours with the gun in our hand and points it to his chest. And he says, we do owe him a curtain call grander than death itself. He continues to push us as our hands tremble against his chest. Our hands start to ease and we're like, we don't want to kill him. I don't want to do this. And instead he offers us help. He tightens his hands around ours further, putting his finger over ours on the trigger. He steadies the gun and pulls the trigger himself. There's a cut and we find out we've been unconscious for another day. And during this time that we're unconscious, we're plagued by this feeling of hunger and emptiness that is honestly uncontrollable, the way it's described. We awaken to the masked men saying that, they need to wake us up, and they're kind of making all these jokes on these crazy ways to wake us up. That's when we finally are able to open our eyes because we're listening to them this entire time. And when we open our eyes, we realize they're twins. There's a reason that their masks are identical, and it's because they're identical twins. And we find out their names are Luke and Kieran. When we awaken and, we start to make a little bit of small talk with them, they try to play games with us and try to gaslight us, essentially, that there's only one of them. We're seeing things. We've gone mad. And so we're like, seriously, you two, I know that there's two of you. This is ridiculous. Knock it off. Once we play along with their jokes for a little bit, they finally inform us that we're at Anakinas's base. And this is where our mind kind of flashes back to what happened after Silas pulled the trigger. When Silas pulled the trigger, he didn't die. He says, there you go, you've taken my life. And we start to panic, thinking he's going to die on us. And we toss the gun aside and put our hands on his wound and say, no, you can't die. It's not time for you yet. Then he heals right before our eyes and tells us, save all your worry for the day that you actually do manage to succeed in killing me. We then cut back to the present where Luke and Kieran inform us that there are a ton of different factions and groups of people who are looking for us in the Ether Core. We made a big mess at the nest with the big move that we made. They try to convince us and inform us of the dangers, that if we leave Anakinas's base and try to go fully into the N109 zone alone, we're not going to live to see another day, and that they tell us we're better off staying with Silas. We find a laser pointer in our pocket and decide, these boys love jokes, let's play a joke back on them. And we tell them about this crazy super secret hunter weapon and act like this laser pointer is that weapon. As we're kind of telling them about this weapon, we get close enough to pull Luke into our arms and hold him hostage with this laser pointer that they think is a weapon. We tell Kieran, open the door and let us go. And Kieran just kind of walks over the door and opens it. He's like, it was never locked. Calm down. When we realized the door wasn't locked, we realized that they were trying to be genuine in their act of convincing us to stay with Silas. It was not a demand, it was more of almost a plea that, hey, this is where you're going to be safe. Silas isn't as bad as you think he is. Kieran tells us to head down the hall to this door. That'll be our way out. We're shocked at their cooperation, so we let Luke go, and as we get down the hall a little bit, we decide to throw him the laser pointer. Little old Luke is so happy we give him this super secret hunter weapon until we inform him it's just a laser pointer. And they definitely gain a lot of respect for us in that moment, knowing that we can play the game right back to them. We try to get a signal on our hunter's watch, and there's no luck. And as we're making our way down the hall, we come across that mechanical crow once more, who sees us and then flaps off, going through a window to a different room. And we decide to follow him. In the room that the crow flew into, we can hear classical music on the other side of the door and two voices speaking. One voice rings out saying that they plan to implant protocores into hearts, and then they'll insert human consciousness into wanderers. Then he continues saying their project has a name, the Fountain of Ate. Silas then speaks up saying he's not interested in other people's business, and he knows that the man is lying and keeping information from him. The unknown man pleads and begs for his life, saying that he'll help Silas, he can find out more information. Suddenly it goes quiet. That's when Silas's voice rings out once more, asking us, well, are you going to come in? Knowing that we're on the other side of the door. When we walk in, we're expecting it to be a gory mess, knowing that another voice was in the room with him. But when we walk in, we're not presented with a gory mess. We're just presented with a well-stocked dining room table full of wonderful food and wine. At the sight of all of this food and wine, we get that insatiable hunger feeling again, and we try to shove it back down. But Silas pours us a glass of wine. We ask him if he's mocking us, but he insists he's giving us a way out. If we want to leave, you're free to go. As we begin drinking this glass of wine, kind of challenging him, we drink another and another, and this insatiable hunger is kind of consuming us. He offers to make us a deal, saying that he's the only one who can give us what we want, and he needs us to resonate with him. We blindly agree to his terms, kind of drunk on not just the wine, but this hunger and anger that is fueling us. We rashly grab his hand, desperate to find any sort of emotion on his face, to break through this cold facade. And this is where we make a note that his power feels familiar to us somehow. As this drunken hunger kind of lessens and we're able to realize that this was a bold move that we would typically never make, we go to take away our hand, but he grips it tighter, not ready to let it go. He notices that despite our arrogance, we don't have control over our Evol, and he finally slowly lets our hand go. He informs us to eat as much as we would like and take our time, and once we're done, to meet him outside to continue discussing the terms of this deal. We go to meet him outside, only to be greeted with this fine, delicious man that is Silas, leaning up against his motorcycle, waiting for us. When we arrive at the place that we're going to, we head into the shop that he's very clearly familiar with. He kind of takes one of the shop chairs and just comfortably sits down and lets the shopkeeper start talking and fill him in on things. Silas tells the shopkeep that he's brought us to be this man's guinea pig, and that it's time for this man's Evol linkage alteration project to have a human test subject. We freak out at even hearing these words. We plead with the man that Silas is crazy, he doesn't know what he's talking about, we have normal Evol, don't listen to him. And the man's running some tests, and he's shocked when he finds out that we have the resonance Evol. Silas asks if they did anything while he was away, and the man just informs him that there were only the 2 explosions that caused major issues. One in the northern suburbs, and one in the Bloomshore district. Our explosion. Silas says that he overestimated them, and the man says that these people have made a mess and they're just trying to put all the blame on Silas now that they've created this mess, and that they want Silas to be a scapegoat. We're shocked to find out this information, and we're questioning, who is they? What do you mean that you weren't responsible? Like, we're shocked that Silas isn't responsible for it, because that's what we've been told. It was on a kindness all along. Silas points out that we're more willing to accept a lie and not look for the truth because it makes us feel better. The man interjects and says that we're not a suitable candidate for his project. He says that our Evol linkage is normal and only that our strength is suppressed. Silas looks at us longingly, asking if someone could have done that. Could they have suppressed our strength or messed with our Evol linkage at all? And the man says it's not physical. This is when we interject and we tell Silas, I can resonate with other people just fine. I don't have any issues resonating. He kind of freezes just a little bit. Silas's emotions are very hard to read, and you have to be ready because they are so quick. They go by so quickly, and then his cold facade returns. Silas asks the shopkeep about something that he wants altered, and the man says that it was a difficult thing to alter, but the energy has increased tenfold. This is when a door opens and a giant wanderer comes out, and Silas sets it on us in the hopes that it will awaken our Evol linkage. The wanderer is about to end us when it suddenly stops and retreats. Silas tells the man to alter our linkage now and make it as strong as possible. Silas's face is covered in anger and hurt. He kind of forcefully intertwines our hands again, and we're telling him, no, like, I can't take this, and he says, you can handle this. The man informs him the reason we can't resonate with him. Our Evol uses waves generated by the brain's magnetic field, and he suggests that our brain produces repulsive waves just even thinking about Silas, and that we're probably scared and rejecting him, or just fully disgusted by the thought of Silas. Silas looks off into the distance, defeated, and gives this very upsetting sigh, and he won't look at us. When he finally does look at us, it's almost like he's finally looking at a stranger for once. There's confusion and so many different emotions running behind his eyes as he looks at us for the first time, it feels like. Silas gently lets us go, and the shopkeep kind of pulls us to another room to run a few more tests on us. And this is where the man tells us Silas is our best option to stay safe. He's not as bad as everyone makes him out to seem, and compared to everyone else that runs around in the N109 zone, he is our safest option. We see a familiar logo on some of his old files, and we ask him if he knew our grandmother. He kind of waves us off and doesn't go into it, and he just says, I'm repaying Josephine's kindness. And with that, we're sent on our way. We head out to find Silas, and we step out into the street to find he's nowhere to be seen. The man has left us. A little girl approaches us, offering to sell us like this cute little flower, and then she's like, I also got guns and ammo. Like, it's the N109 zone, and we are constantly being reminded of that this is not Lincoln. We asked the little girl, where's the best place to get some intel? And she willingly takes us to a nearby bar. We notice that Silas's mechanical crow starts to follow us, so obviously he is watching in some way, shape, or form. Underneath the streetlight that the crow has been waiting on is a pile of dead rats. Mixed with the insides of the deceased rats scattered about, there are also broken pieces of monitoring equipment that were inside the rats. So we know that Silas's crow took out monitoring equipment that was in the N109 zone. The little girl drags us to a bar called Elysium, and we're offered an outrageous price for information on the auction and the ether core. The woman sees we're not willing to pay this price, and she ends up opening up the door to a back room where everyone is gambling, and we hear people talking about the auction being held at the Solon Hotel tomorrow. And she shuts the door, and she's like, do you see that Silas and all of these high-profile people are involved in this? There's a reason there's a high price tag on this intel. So we just kind of hang around the bar and eavesdrop on people to see what kind of intel we can get for free. This is where we begin to notice that Silas is almost kind of a myth right now. People have speculated that he went missing, and we find out that a man named Sherman has kind of been running on a kindness. We asked the little girl who ends up coming back up to us if she knows about Silas. She describes him as a monster with huge wings, horns, and can never die. This is when gunshots ring out within the bar, and a group of men fill the room, and we take the little girl and hide in a utility closet. We overhear these men talk to the barkeeper, and we find out they are part of Mr. Sherman's crew. These men have a picture of us, and they're looking for us when Silas's mechanical crow swoops in and goes to attack this man. Silas more or less appears from the shadows, and these men start to spray their bullets at him. They don't even touch him. Silas crushes them with his mist. He proceeds to strangle these men with his Evol. One of these men get away, and we tease him and saying, for these people being your people, supposedly, they're not very obedient. This is when the leader calls in an endless amount of wanderers who don't seem to die. Silas wraps his arms around us and essentially uses our hands once more to aim the gun. We're fighting off these wanderers, and they are endlessly coming at us. They do not seem to be stopping. And we tell Silas we have to retreat, and he's like, I am not retreating. Do you know who I am? He tells us to consider it target practice, and he takes the gun, blowing out the fuse box. He tells us he'll offer us a deal, and that if we can stand our ground for 5 minutes, we can go to the auction tomorrow. He inserts a communicator into our ear, and his tone becomes very gentle, saying, "If you are to die, you will meet your end here." We fight the Wanderers for a while, pissed that he left us, and he finally comes on over the comms and says, "This isn't actually practice. You're just stalling for time right now." It's dark and we're beginning to struggle. The Wanderers are constantly bearing down on us. He tells us to shoot for the crow, and he tells us that the crow is helping us. We find out the crow's name is Mephisto. Mephisto's eyes light the way, letting us know where we should shoot, and we end up shooting a few barrels of alcohol, igniting the Wanderers on fire. We realize that these Wanderers don't cry out. There's no pain, and now that the fires lit up the room, we can see beneath the corroded crystallized skin, these Wanderers have human faces. We cut to outside where the leader is fleeing, and he trips over a broken auto. And this auto starts repeating this very odd script that says 67 days until the project is completed. We will announce the greatest discovery to the world. The man pushes open a hidden iron door. In the middle of all of the junk, there is a flux nexus platform. The stone platform lights up strangely. Silas catches up to him, strangling him with his Evol. While he has the man in the air, Silas's Evol stretches out to the flux nexus, blowing it to pieces. All of the Wanderers collapse. They stop appearing, and they essentially die. We cut back to us, take a small sample of the crystals because we're confused on how these Wanderers have human faces underneath. Silas comes back, and the barkeeper hugs us, placing a small storage device in our pocket, thanking us for saving the little girl, more or less. Back at the base, Silas leaves us be for a little bit, and Mephisto starts making noise at us, and we realize he has a broken wing. We start to apologize. Maybe we hit him with our gun, but Silas put us there in the first place, so we start bickering with a mechanical crow, and this is where the beef between Mephi and us originates. Silas ends up walking in, catching us, arguing with his crow. He doesn't deny that Mephisto was following us. And we kind of tell him, like, this is all your fault. Like, why am I arguing with the crow? It's you. Silas explains that in the N109 zone, we can't escape his influence. Whether it's Mephisto following him or someone else, he will always know where we are. He says don't be delusional to us for even thinking that we could escape his influence. We call him delusional right back for even hoping that we would dislike him less so that we can resonate with him. Saying such a hurtful thing still doesn't get a rise of anger out of him. He's still calm and collected. He takes Mephi into his arms and hands us his glass of wine, and he tells us to bring him more wine. And we're like, do I look like a bar to you? And he gives us his first genuine laugh, and it's hearty and rich, and he just says, a bar would be more obedient than you. He tells us to follow him, and we go to a little workshop. We transfer the data from the storage device and realize that there's a hologram of the hotel and a list of the auction attendees. We ask Silas about Mr. Sherman. Silas asks us, why are you interested in a dead man? Basically saying, he's already marked him for death. Don't even worry about it. We start arguing with Mephisto again, and Silas looks at us with a very gentle look and says, you can scold me directly. Seeing that gentle look and getting to see past his kind of cold facade, we finally accept that we have been unreasonably angry with him, and we don't know why we've been so angry. Because at first our anger could have been explained as we thought he was in charge of the bombings for our family. But once we found that out, why are we still so angry? And we can't place that feeling that is deep down in our soul, hint, hint, towards the myths. We realized that the explosions were likely done by Mr. Sherman and whoever else is working with him. We quickly changed the subject, finally asking him what Silas meant when he said that we're the same. We ask him if he has an ether core in his eye, and his reply is, sure, you can think of it like that. He tells us that his eye lets him see what people want the most, and that it exposes their desires that they refuse to admit. We make the mistake of looking into his eye again, and the visions and the voices start to happen once more. When we finally kind of snap back to reality, he's very close to us face to face. We reach out gently, kind of touching around his eye, and he doesn't break eye contact. He looks deep into our eyes as if he's searching for something. He asks us if we've gone mad before moving in even closer, closing that distance between us. And he doesn't push it away. We realize that he likes the touch. He likes our touch. In this moment, something sparks in us and we ask him if he wants to try to resonate once more. We don't wait for his answer. We grab his hand. We start to think internally about him being good at fighting and him looking good over and over again. We repeat, he's good at fighting, he looks good. He's good at fighting, he looks good. And he jokes that he can hear us. And we tell him to enjoy it, because this is one of the only two good things I can think about you at the moment. Boldly ask him if he can help us get the ether core, and we will resonate with him. We're willing to be his bait to finish the cleanup of Anakainis. His counter offer is to take a jewel-encrusted crow brooch from him within 24 hours, and he's willing to take us to the auction. This is where I want to talk about the Midnight Stealth Bond, but it's technically not canon to the story. If you are romancing Silas, this is where that would come into play, and that would be canon then. But because we are treating the main story as the main story, none of the branches are canon. So, in that case, we cut to 24 hours later. We're standing in front of a mirror with the crow brooch on our chest, dressed in an elegant dress and jewels. We're informed that after several twists and turns, we were able to get the brooch from him. Silas appears behind us and says it suits you. No one can stay away when a beauty is walking around. Silas informs us of the plan before giving us one more bold once-over. He doesn't hide it. And we leave. We head to the auction. There is a cut to the same galaxy that we've seen before in the shape of an eye, with the narration, "In the sky, the stars are devoured by endless darkness. The deep space tunnel is silent, seemingly frozen in time. Suddenly, there's a thud, a pulse resembling a heartbeat. Cosmic dust silently fills the air. Something penetrates the invisible barrier and opens its eyes." We cut back to inside the auction, and we take Silas's arms. People are shocked at the mere sight of Silas. Silas gives us another communicator and reminds us to be good bait for him before he hands us his card and tells us to have fun. We're walking around and we see an array of protocores, but there's no ether core in sight. We decide to buy one of the modified protocores. Silas interjects, speechless, that we would offer such a low bid and tells us to bid more. We tell him, you know what, fine, we'll match that energy, and we end up buying all of the protocores available. We cut back to Silas and his meeting with Mr. Sherman. Sherman insists that he did not betray Silas. Silas knows that Sherman is a coward, and that he also knows that whoever helped Sherman take hold of Anakainis must have gave him a very good offer. Silas ends Sherman for his betrayal and being a traitor. And back out in the banquet hall, we are being watched by everyone around us. A man comes up to us offering to buy our crow brooch gifted to by Silas. And we brush him off and we're telling him no thanks. He's not backing down. He won't leave us alone. When Silas appears, wrapping his arm around our waist and says, "Sorry, the brooch is a gift from me." We match his energy, playing right along, placing his hand delicately on Silas's chest, saying, "He was about to pay a fortune for a dance with me. What are you gonna pay?" The man finally leaves, taking the hint that we want nothing to do with him. Silas tells us his price that he would pay, and he knows the location of the ether core. But first, he'd like a dance with us. While we dance, Silas is looking intently at us like he always does. There's always this genuine intent when he's looking at us, like he's searching for something. And we realize as we're kind of circling around this room dancing, this is a trap for Silas. There's tons of people, weapons, guns, everything. Silas tells us not to worry. An explosion goes off and we realize Silas has the detonator. This crazy man set off his own bomb that is supposed to be a trap for him because he was impatient. He gives us a better weapon. Wanderers start to appear, so we start to go at it and fight them off. After ending all the wanderers, we find a little henchman hiding in the corner, all pathetic. We press our gun to his head, questioning him, asking what his plan is or what their plan is. And the man informs us they have a backup plan and we're not going to win. Silas ends him right then and there. He doesn't care what this man has to say. Silas takes us to a higher floor where it is an abandoned lab for experiments. When we see a familiar logo again, and it's Ever's lab. Silas points out that many places were affected by the disaster 14 years ago, but only the N109 zone was turned into a wasteland. And he questions us, why do you think that is? We look up to see the deep space tunnel as close as we have ever seen it before, and that's when we see a flux nexus station. Silas tells us, are you sure you want to do this? There's no going back once you take this. As soon as we touch the ether core, a violent storm appears and wild fluctuations lash out from the deep space tunnel. A huge wanderer emerges from the deep space tunnel, and we kind of black out. We see a dark, fiery abyss, our hands covered in blood once more like the vision we've had before. And we hear Silas's voice telling us that we must press on. And then we look up from our bloodied hands to see a man or a creature stabbed through the heart. We snap back to reality with Silas telling us, the life you owe me, now is not the time to repay it. Wake up. He's basically, he's more or less like, wake up, snap out of it. We finally resonate with him and defeat the Wanderer. When the rays disappear, Silas is deep in thought, looking up to the deep space tunnel. The ether core's vessel breaks, and we look to him, confused on what happened. He informs us that the power belongs to us, so obviously the vessel's going to break. The power is within us now. This is when our wrists become cuffed by an orange-red light, and Silas looks at our wrists in disbelief. We cut to a few narration pages, informing us the tremor that shook the deep space tunnel ignites a chain reaction throughout the N109 zone. The people who thought they ruled Anakinus were dealt with. We realized that Silas didn't just help us get the ether core back, just to be able to clean up Anakinus' house, essentially, and clean out all the traitors. He obviously must have different motives, because that was a high price to pay, essentially. We think back once again on his expression as he gazed into the deep space tunnel, and that longing look really sticks in our mind. It's embedded in our mind. We cut back to us being at the Anakinus base, and our linkage is still there. We receive a call from Luke and Kieran informing us that they cleaned up the nest. They've done their job. No one's going to be bothering us. We don't have to worry about that, because Silas asked them to. And they start to say, Silas isn't that bad. And Silas is like, goodbye. And Luke and Kieran freak out of like, oh no, I'm sorry, we didn't try to we don't want to let her know you're a softie, even though he is definitely a big old softie. Silas makes a remark that our linkage has to do with our resonance, and that because of our resonance levels, it's not going to last much longer. We ask him about our bloody hand vision and the figure with a sword stabbed through his heart, and he tells us it's no big deal. You're going to be seeing more of that from now on. That's the brooch, and that's kind of our ticket to come and go as we please. As the chapter closes out, we get one more set of narration. We see a frozen spaceship crashed, and the words, "The doors of memory have swung open." We hear a faint, distant heartbeat at the junction of entwined timelines, echoing through the stillness of eternity. Once again, adding to that endless abyss, silence, eye, and endless darkness imagery that has kind of been shown throughout these chapters. And with that, that is the end of the long-awaited Revelry, and I will see you in the next one.